Okay, in the last video, we looked at adding an image to the to building this car scene, although clearly don't have a very good image of the car here. But what we want to do now is we want to switch from this scene to be able to go to our all cars scene, which is going to look something like this. And it's going to have a list of cars on this side, and it's going to have the image of the car on that side. So I select a car, I see the image, right? So I should be able to click through different images. And to get from one scene to the next, we need to have a way of doing that. So if I look at my new cars controller here, I have this submit button. So what I can do is, once a valid car is created, I can automatically switch to the other scene. So let's go to our controller here, and if we scroll down, we've got the submit button pressed. So here I check if the fields are ready to submit. If they are, we try to create a new car object, and if we're successful, we'll set the text. Now, if this errors out for some reason, it really should be inside of a try catch. So I'm going to say try to build a new car. And catch all of our regular exceptions, our legal argument exceptions, E. And do we have an error place here? Yes, we have an error label. So I'm going to say if that's the case, then error label, set the text, and we'll ask our exception to give us its message. Okay, so if we make it to here, right? So we try to create a new car. If it triggers an exception, it's going to jump down to line 96. If it doesn't trigger an exception, we've created a new car. So what I'm going to do at that point is I'm going to say change scenes, and I'll pass this new car into a method called change scenes. So the idea with change scenes, this method, is it's going to get the necessary information to move over to this view. Okay. So to do that, let's create a new method here. What do we call this one? New car. Okay, so public void, and we're going to pass in our new car object. So public void, change scenes, and we'll pass in a car. Okay, so change the scene. To do that, is going to look very familiar to the way we normally would load our first scene. So if we look at our launch class here, we have in here a start method. And in here we get an fxml loader to load the fxml file. Based on that, we create the scene, and then we set the title, and then we set the scene onto the stage and show it. So we're going to do basically the exact same thing in our when we want to change scenes. All right, start with this, paste it in here, and there's a couple things though that that we need to keep track of. One is we're going to need to gain access to the actual current stage that we're using. And one way that we can do that is from the event that's triggered. You see here where it says submit button pressed, and it triggers an action event. We can use this event to get the node to get our stage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass that event in as well. into our method. So I'm going to go down here now. I'm going to say action event. Okay. And the other thing that I'm going to do that's a little bit different is here, this will work, right? I can load the all cars view. But it's not going to behave the way that we want necessarily. So what we want to be able to do is we want to get access to the controller class so that we can pass in this car object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this over a couple of lines. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say fxml loader. So now I have an fxml loader object. And here where it says .load, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same string, but rather than actually load it, I'm going to set the location. And so I'm going to pass in this so that my fxml loader is pointing to that file. I haven't loaded it yet. And then I can say parent, I'll just call it parent equals loader load. Now that nets out to do the same thing as before. The difference here is that I have this loader object that I can still interact with. If we did it the other way, the way that it's done in the launch method, when this is complete, I don't have an fxml loader object that I can use. And here it's saying it wants to have us handle this IO exception. And the reason that there's an IO exception is because if this file is not found or it's not readable, I have an input-output exception that will be triggered. So it's saying we need to handle that. So here in the launch method, the way we do that is we put this throws exception on our method, right? So that means we're expecting that this exception could blow up. So we can do that. If I go Alt-Enter, it says add exception to method signature, and there we go. Now, because this is a checked exception, that means we're going to have to also have it here. Now this is already in a try catch, but I'm not catching an IO exception, right? So here, I can do that, right? I can just add. So either an illegal argument exception is thrown or an IO exception is thrown, and we'll just display it to the screen. So now, now we have a loader object that we can use. And we can also create our scene from our parent. Now, here's where it's a little bit different. Here we can access the controller for the destination. So here, I'm going to create an instance of the all cars controllers. I should call that all car controller singular. Factor, name. Okay, all cars controller. And I'm just going to call that our controller equals. And here's what's neat. Because I have this fxml loader as a separate thing, I can actually say it will get the controller. So now I have an instance of this controller class that I can now use. So I can pass in, I can say, I can go to that class. Let's go to that class right now. And in here, I just have the minimum, I just have an initialized method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say public void, put a selected car up here, target car. So So this variable can hold whatever my currently selected car is from my list view. So here, I'm going to call this car. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to say the selected car equals the car. So I can call this method and set this instance variable directly. So I've got my new car controller. So now I can say controller. And you can see I can pass in a car. So I'm going to pass in this car that we got in our change scenes object, or our change scenes method. Now, the other thing we need to do is when we have the launch method, you can see we're given the stage from the actual method itself. So when launch is called, at some point this launch method calls start and it passes in a stage. When we're already inside of a view or inside of a scene, we can get this stage from the objects within the scene. So the person pushed the button, that button triggers an event. I'm going to use that event to get the actual stage. So here I'm going to say stage. I'll go name primary stage so it sounds the same. So here's where I ask the event to get its source and then get the scene. Oops. Get the scene, and then from there we can get the window, which is our stage. And here, for title, we'll call this all cars and show. So that will take us to the new scene. So let's give this a run and see how it goes. Okay, so we'll load a default car. We'll choose an image of a skier. And we'll say submit. And here, you can see I triggered an exception, an IO exception. It says all cars.fxml, line 12. Okay. So the only downside of putting it, oh, what's this? Trying to load student card CSS. So one of the challenges when you handle your exceptions nicely is when you get the message isn't always that robust. It's just the final bit. So what we want to do is we want to get the whole stack trace to understand what's going on. So what I'm going to say is print the stack trace. This will also allow it to come out in the console. I'd remove this in my final, if I was sending this over to my client, but for troubleshooting, this is a quick way to see the full stack trace. So here I'm going to load my default car, I hit submit, it goes to change scenes and it breaks. And then I can go through this, this stack trace. And I want to encourage you, it's always super important, even though this seems intimidating. There's a lot of stuff that broke here. But often it's really just one thing that broke, and it's just a matter of finding it. And if I start at the bottom and I work my way up, I see class not found exception called all cars. Right? So I don't have a class called all cars. And that's true. If I look through my classes, I have an all cars controller, a car class, a date picker class, etc. I don't have a class called all cars. And I might think to myself, why is it even trying to load something called all cars? And if I keep scrolling up, usually you'll see some highlights. Here's some stuff in blue. So we can see that it was the change scenes method. And specifically, it was when we tried to load our allcars.fxml file that things blew up. And if I keep scrolling, I see I have a load exception in here, and I can see in the allcars.fxml file on line 12 is where this load exception happened. So if I go to my allcars file and I scroll to line 12 and I look across, it says my FX controller should be called allcars. So I was expecting a file called allcars.java. I do not have one of those. I have one called allcars controller. So if I start to type that, now it says allcars controller. Let's try running it again. Load a default car, hit submit, and now it's changing to this scene. So that's great. Now, what that proves is that we're able to change to the scene. We haven't actually loaded anything in our scene yet, but that's going to come in the next video.